This is George Clark from Death Heaven, and you're listening to The New Scene.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The New Scene. I am your host, Keith, and we're back with another brand new episode. It's a new month, and we've got an exciting new episode with Claudio Sanchez of Coheed and Cambria and the Prize Fighter Inferno. The Prize Fighter Inferno is in the middle of their first ever tour right now, and they just released a new single, Virtual Pioneers, as well as a reimagined version of The Going Price for Home. And Coheed, well, they need no introduction. One of the biggest and greatest bands to come from our scene. They've done incredible things over the span of their career, and we cover all of that in this upcoming conversation, which is coming up shortly. But first, here's how you can support The New Scene. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at New Scene Pod. Reviews. We are just about at 200 Apple Podcast reviews. We sit at 198. Let's get us over the hump this week. Open up your iPhone. Open up the podcast app. Search The New Scene. Scroll down a bit and hit that 5-star button. If you write a review, I'll read it at the end of the show. Shirts. We have shirts for sale at Death Wish Inc. A long sleeve option and t-shirt options. Pick one up. It's a great way to support the show. Also, you can always email me at newscenepod@iodinerecords.com. Also, don't forget to support Iodine Recordings. Iodine Recordings is excited to announce that Love Letter have signed with the label. Love Letter features ex-members of Verse and Defeater. It's a great band. They have a debut EP out there that hopefully you've heard by now. And I think I saw their first show on my last run with the Darling Fire, if I'm not mistaken. Great band. Welcome to the label. Can't wait to hear the LP. Stretch Armstrong and Iodine Recordings are teasing something for March 8th. It looks big. What could it be? I'm excited. Sign up for the Iodine email list to find out what this is and all of the other news updates first. One Line Drawing. The Sketchbook 2X LP is available now for pre-order. Sketchbook features a collection of songs from Jonah's early solo years from 1999 to 2001. It includes the sketchy EPs, which are completely remastered for vinyl. It also includes original songs and renditions of the likes of 7 Seconds and Jawbox, as well as the Sensefield split, honoring the late John Bunch. The 2X LP also includes liner notes and a 12-page zine written by Norman Brannon of Texas Is the Reason and Antimatter Zine. You will also find 2 tracks performed with Walter Schreifels and Rival Schools. That sounds incredible. I can't wait to see that. And Iodine Recordings just signed Further Seems Forever. There's going to be more news on that soon. Horsewhip have March tour dates. Check out their page for a full list of dates. No Man and Jerome's Dream will be playing New Friends Fest. That's August 2nd through 4th in Toronto. No Man, Glitter and Spit, the LP. That's up for pre-order. Pick that up. And remember, they're playing Richmond, Virginia on May 3rd and Brooklyn on May 4th with the great Strike Anywhere. Don't forget to join the Iodine Noise Cult. Volume 3. If you sign up, you'll get every Iodine vinyl release that's coming out this year. You also get rare deluxe variants, free shipping, bonus flexies, hand-numbered Obi strips. Spots are limited, so sign up soon. And don't forget to support this month's sponsor. It's a brand new sponsor for a brand new month. And that sponsor is Persistent Vision Records. Persistent Vision is a DIY-focused label based out of Richmond, Virginia. Persistent Vision is home to many great releases from bands like Page 99, Abak, Lagrimas, Massa Nera, Goetia, and more. And here's some updates from the label. Out March 15th, Putrid Obsolete, the sophomore LP from Prisoner. 8 songs of nightmarish blackened crust, metal, and harsh industrial noise. It's available on limited, colored vinyl and cassette. See Prisoner on tour in the Southeast US, March 13th through the 22nd. Check their page for a full list of dates. And this was just announced. Page 99 have an April Midwest tour with Massa Nera. Tickets are on sale now. Check their pages for a full list of dates. The pre-order for the Departure of Consciousness LP from Farn will be up March 15th. This is the 10-year anniversary reissue of the debut LP from Funeral Doom Ensemble Farn, and it's available in limited colored vinyl. They just announced upcoming East Coast and West Coast tour dates in June, and they'll have a brand new LP out later this year on Persistent Vision. You can order online at persistentvisionrecords.com and deathwishinc.com. And for more updates, don't forget to follow the label on Instagram at Persistent Vision Records. Okay, so make sure you check back in with me in segment 3. We'll do a recap on Claudio. I've got a lot of new reviews and feedback and emails from listeners. We'll catch up. We'll talk about everything. But right now, we are going to speak to Claudio Sanchez of the Prize Fighter Inferno and Coheed and Cambria. Enjoy. All right, we are here now with Claudio Sanchez. Claudio, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, Claudio, it's great to have you here. You know, there's a lot going on with you. The Prize Fighter Inferno have new music out and an upcoming tour, and Coheed is continuing to do great things, as well as having an amazing legacy in music. And look, we're going to cover all that, but first, I want to ask you, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm actually really nervous because today is, the day before we actually start on the Prize Fighter run, which, I never thought was something that was going to happen. So the nerves are up. So, I've just been spending the day like sort of packing, getting all the loose ends together for some of the things that I'm working on to ensure that I can like leave the computer at home and just focus on the performance on the tour. And, I'm a bit of a nervous wreck, Keith. I can't lie.
Yeah, I've read about you. You have anxiety, right? Is it just social anxiety or general anxiety?
I think it's general, but it's truly magnified in social settings for sure. It's pretty great, actually. It's pretty great. I love it. No, my wife is like quite the opposite. So we really like level each other out, and it's every day. I'm just like kind of blown away at how open and quick and she can talk to anything, and it's just something that I don't have a skill for, and it's pretty crippling.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I get nervous before I do anything, especially if it's talking to somebody. And if I have to make an actual phone call on the phone, I obsess about that all day, and I have to like psych myself up to do it.
Oh, for real? Like mine is I live in Brooklyn. So, and I love the city. I love running around. Walking is actually kind of one of my favorite things to do because it just allows me to think. It gives me, it just gives me that time. And I have a hard time just stopping in anywhere.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? Like I will walk or take the subway or whatever. Just I got to get home if I need to get water. The interaction with a stranger is like just not something I want to do.
No, I understand. See, I have this friend, right? And when I live in New York City too, I live in Brooklyn. What part of Brooklyn do you live in?
I live in Crown Heights.
Oh, nice. I'm in Williamsburg.
Oh, okay. Right on.
Yeah. So I have this friend, and we'll walk around in Manhattan, and he runs up to everybody. Like, there'll be a homeless guy, and he'll run up to the homeless guy and give him money and start a conversation. There'll be like Jews for Jesus people. He'll run up to them and start talking. There'll be guys selling weed. He'll run up to them and start talking. And that's my worst fear, because I don't, it's not that I'm like unfriendly. I'm just very nervous talking to random people on the street like that I don't know.
Right. I agree. I envy your friend. Like, I wish I could be that awesome. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, it's just not. Yeah, I'm just afraid of myself. Like, and in those situations, and like, just, I don't know.
Yeah, it takes me a long time to get comfortable, I guess. But listen, that's part of the journey.
Right.
So, the Prize Fighter Inferno. Now we have a new single out, which is excellent, and I love the revisited track too. The Going Price for Home, reimagined. I love that too. And we have this tour coming up, which you shouldn't be too nervous about, Claudio, because a lot of these dates are sold out. People want to see it.
I know, but that to me screams like expectations are high. and for this project, I never meant for it to be a live project. I mean, it was always a project of isolation. It was always something that was just a way for me to kind of express myself like alone, without like the cooperation of others. And though now, as I've gotten older, my wife is involved, and on that 7-inch, our friend Dave Parker, who has worked with Coheed, is involved. But the original idea was like myself, when I was a teenager, like writing songs on a cassette 4-track, in my bedroom in my parents' house. And like, I never thought it would go any further than that. And that was cool. That was fine with me. But I think as I got older, Coheed has done its thing, and now I feel like I want the challenge. Though today, maybe an hour or so ago, I would have felt I may have answered this question a little differently, because I thought was on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
Yeah,
but it's it's cool. Yeah, I think I may have got off the rails there a little bit, Keith.
No, it's going to be fine. Look, that's part of the fun. Is this is how it is for me, and if you're anything similar, it's maybe the same for you. Is there's this intense nervousness before any of these things, but then once you do it and it goes well, you have that feeling of elation and like, yes, I did it. It's done.
But what if it doesn't go well?
Well, we're professionals, so even if it doesn't go well,
I know.
It still goes pretty well, right?
Right.
So, Prize Fighter, I mean, you were writing some of this music as far back as the early 90s, right? Did all of that material, that you collected over the years just lead up to that first full length in 2006?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got my, let's see, probably earlier than that. My dad and I, we took a trip to I think Robbie's Music in Nanuet, New York, and that's where I bought my first 4-track. And really, that's kind of like where the beginning of Prize Fighter sort of happened. And Coheed. I mean, that's how I learned how to write music, is using, probably much like, people do now with GarageBand or anything like that. I mean, I didn't have like musical training. So it was just like trial and error, recording things, strumming chords as I would learn from, fake books and things like that. And then, of course, like shortly after that, I got into synthesis. I purchased my first little groove box. I mean, of course, I had things like, SK1s and Casio tone banks and things like that. But I bought a MC303 and then, just incorporating that into the acoustic sort of situation. That was actually the initial inception of Coheed and Cambria, but not the Coheed and Cambria we know, but the Coheed and Cambria before it, which was just me, a guitar, and a groove box. So the band actually adopted the name when we got signed to Equal Vision, because everybody seemed to like it. So then the Prize Fighter Inferno just made sense for whatever that project was going to be.
Yeah. how did you decide it was time to do more with Prize Fighter and put out that first record?
I had the material and I felt like there was a thread there. And some of my favorite records from that era, or when I started kind of constructing these ideas in the 90s, were like the B-side records. Like when Nirvana put out like Incesticide, or Smashing Pumpkins with Pisces Iscariot. Like I like almost loved those records more than their actual, releases, because they had this like lo-fi quality to them, this vulnerability, this they were writing them, at least from my understanding, maybe writing the material at that time. Like Billy Corgan's rendition of Landslide, like was to me, like, my wife might not necessarily love it because she's such a Fleetwood Mac fan, but for me, I loved that song. I couldn't stop playing it. And then that first John Frusciante record, which I like, that to me was like probably the moment where I was like, oh, this stuff that I'm doing, I can release, because I loved that record for all of its like quirks and flaws. And, that to me go down as like one of my favorite records of all time.
That Smashing Pumpkins cover of Landslide, I loved that when it came out. I still remember being in the car with my dad and I'm like, I love this song. He's like, that's a cover. And I was like, no, you're kidding me.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. And my dad listened to Fleetwood Mac, but I don't think we listened to it together. But like in him listening to that band, like that song just never crossed my periphery, and that when I heard it for the first time, then it wasn't even just me. It was like the circle of friends that I ran with. Like we all listened to it. We all embraced it. It was like a powerful song for us as a collective.
I know you've played Prize Fighter songs live in certain circumstances, but this tour coming up will be the first official shows for the band, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you never wanted to do it before, or was there just not time? Like, what's the story?
Yeah, I think if I even considered it back then, there was a hair of like, just like uncertainty. I didn't really know like how I would execute it. I knew I didn't want it to be like a full on like band. And I also just felt like, I didn't want to leave, for a substantial amount of time doing this other thing while Coheed had its, it was on its own trajectory, so I didn't want to like halt that. But and I think also just like fear too. It was never at those times, it was never really meant to be something to showcase. It was always just to be performed like this or as I say that, I'm actually in my home studio, so it's just here alone, and to be listened to on record or whatever have you. But I think I thought, I guess I wanted the challenge now, and my wife and I, we do so much together, and my son really loves those records and he loves touring. So this week is going to be his midwinter recess, so that's actually why we scheduled it for this time, is so we wouldn't have to keep him out of school for that long. So yeah, just these things sort of aligned, and like my desire to sort of challenge myself at this place in my life.
That makes sense. Yeah, but I can understand the hesitation. Well, one, based on what we've talked about so far, you just have some fear and anxiety in general. But two, it is a departure from Coheed. People are expecting a big operatic rock and roll from Coheed, so it is a risk to do a more lo-fi band like Prize Fighter.
Right. And it's so I was doing an interview yesterday actually, and this kind of came up, and I was like, oh wow, that's pretty good. I like, sometimes it's really hard for me to like say something that I think is pretty good, but like Coheed for me is like when I'm on stage, it's like Superman, right? Off stage, I'm a completely different person. I'm like, not as confident as the performer up there. Though, yeah, I would, yeah, and you get like little hints of my, we barely like sort of communicate like in a set because it's just, that's when I feel most awkward. But when I'm playing, there's a strength in that, and I feel like I'm alone. And again, so I think of that as like the Superman. Well, now Prize Fighter's going out, and this is now the Clark Kent is going on the stage, because because it's like it's very exposed. There is other accompaniments, but it isn't a live rock band. We're not like we're not pushing air like Coheed would. It's meant to be intimate, and so I was thinking, I was like, the last time I may have really done something like this, like substantially, like with, like a set, I was probably a teenager, you know, and so yeah, so that's the nerves are up. That's all I can say. But yeah, that's the analogy I used, and it made so much sense to me. I was like, wow, that's totally like right. So we'll see.
That is a good analogy. Yeah, that I understand. What's the live setup going to be like? So I mean, obviously you'll be singing. How is your wife involved? She's performing too. What kind of stage setup do we have? Like, what's it going to look like?
So we have some props that we sort of like crafted together. Actually, one of them is in the Going Price for Home video, but it's sort of in the background. So we've done some of that. The instrumentation's acoustic, 2 vocals, and my wife sings a lot of harmony. And we'll have sort of like tracks running from like the drum machines and the synthesizers that we've used, but also Dave will man like sort of a keyboard situation and a modular synth with like a theremin controlling some of the modules via CV control voltage, and yeah, so that's like it, like some, there's some stuff to glue the elements that are sort of playing behind us, but for the most part, it's really like the acoustic and the voice.
So Prize Fighter became active again around 2020. Was that a result of the pandemic and just having more time to put into it?
Yes, but it was really a result of my grandfather dying through the pandemic. So when that was happening, so when the pandemic initially started, as we know, like lockdowns and things like that, my grandfather was admitted to the hospital, and slowly there were these all the restrictions started to come into place. Like there was a moment where my family could actually be in the hospital, and then that sort of gotten taken away, and so on. And I actually couldn't visit him because my wife has an autoimmune disorder, and there's so little known. And they live actually outside the city about 45 minutes, and so I was like, I don't know if I can go. I don't know if I can visit him. And I lived with my grandfather for a very long time. Like we shared like a basement apartment in a 2-family house. Like as I was growing up, like we lived in his house, and we were like roommates. We were like the odd couple. And so he was like a second dad to me. Sorry, I might get a little emotional here. But he would always, as I left, he would always like want me to stay in the town of Valley Cottage. That's where we lived. It was just outside of Nyack, because he knew his time was coming, and it just the fact that it happened when I was home, and I couldn't be there to like say goodbye was really ripped the hell out of me. And then when we did the funeral, it was restricted to just like our small immediate family, and I mean, I don't even think words were even said. It was just it was like such an odd experience for a man that lived. I mean, he lived very long. He lived to be 100 years old. And like with his wits about it, like he was, you know, it was unfortunate, you know, but, you know, World War II vet, you know, lived a lot, you know, say one of his sons passed away early, like in his life, his wife died early. Like, you know, he lived a whole another like 50 years without a significant, like it just, like, I think of these things like after the fact, like after, and it's just like, wow, like it's, you know, it's just, it's heavy. And so when that was happening, the only way I could really express myself was like through song. And the first song that came was More Than Love, the which opened the record. And it was a little bit about like, you know, the fight between like, you know, I want to go see my grandfather, but I can't because my wife is like, I remember taking a picture of her to some of my mom. I was like, what is my wife do? Like with a nebulizer, like just kind of on the floor doing it. Like, I don't know. It was a, you know, it was a heavy time for everyone. And so the only way I could really do anything was to have any release was to sing. And so that it birthed that record. And yeah, I just the cover of the album is actually my son's hand against the bathroom window in the house that we had just moved into before it all happened. Like we had moved in like I think February, and then March, I believe, started the restrictions. Sorry.
No, please. That's you know, it's a very emotional thing. I was just talking about this on another show. Like it just thinking about that time is so crazy. And when you take into account stories like yours, where your beloved grandfather is passing and you can't even get in there to talk to him, it's just heartbreaking. There's a lot of heartbreaking stories that came out of that time, and you know, my sympathies go to you and everyone else. When was the last time you spoke to your grandfather? When was the last time you had an opportunity to speak with him?
I don't even know.
Really?
Yeah. You know, must have been on the driveway of the house. We grew up on an Amory Drive. But you know, he used to just sit in the window and just wave as we drove away.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. A lot of, you know, it's wild. A lot of like, you know, and I know I'm jumping from Inferno to Coheed, but you know, that all those that record and Vaxis too were written like one after another. And as much as like The City Introvert was about those emotions of going through that time, like Stay Where You Are was a song I wrote for my mother because, you know, she wanted to get back into the hospital, and that's the song that ends the record. But, you know, holy shit, sorry. My Vaxis 2, so after he passed, when I was constructing I had written some of the material for the record, but when I was started to like kind of construct the concept, I thought, you know, what an interesting cliffhanger to bring my grandfather to life in the story. So years ago, we did a record called The Afterman, which is about a character called Cyrus Amory, who was loosely based after my grandfather. My grandfather bought this house out of the Bronx. He like lived in the Bronx, and he moved to this upstate house in Valley Cottage on the corner of a street called Amory Drive. And so the Amory Wars, which is the Coheed and Cambria story, is very much it's a personification. It's a beautiful fictionalized version of my life.
Right.
You know, I just had a hard time being introverted. I had a hard time really confessing myself in the song. So I constructed this elaborate fantasy to hide my real life in. And so Cyrus, when we did the record of the Afterman, we decided to do the origin story of like, you know, the key work, right? So we did the stories about this person named Cyrus Amory, who I loosely based after my grandfather. And that story ends with like a big question mark. Like we don't really know what happens to Sirius or Cyrus, however you want to pronounce it. And so Vaxis 2, I thought it would be really interesting, even though we're not entirely sure where we are in the timeline of the Amory Wars, is to bring Cyrus back. And when we did, I was like, we'll bring him back as an elderly man. And so I utilized took the image of my grandfather and I made him the image of Cyrus. And so my grandfather now is a character living in the Amory Wars.
Wow. That's amazing. Is that who's on the cover?
He is the one in the spacesuit behind the Vaxis character, the little boy. The little boy is Vaxis, and behind him is an astronaut. You don't see his face, but it was sort of when we released it, I didn't want to give that away that was serious, so I just kind of wanted to hide him in plain sight. And then if you read the book, Vaxis 2: A Window of the Waking Mind, when you get to the end, he's there, and he comes out of this being called the Quintillion Speaker, which helps the Vaxis character sort of come to animate the Vaxis character, because he's sort of like not anyway, he comes out and his visor comes up and he says the words "All Mother, we're free." And if you're a fan of the mythos behind Coheed and Cambria, that is, All Mother is the AI inside of Sirius's suit that he communicated to when he got lost in the keywork. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on like the nerdy part of Coheed, but I left the emotional part and now we're into the nerdville. But
well, we need balance, right?
But yeah, so it was just a big reveal inside the book. And there's this beautiful art in the book, that same artist that did the cover, Chase Stone. So it's a big moment, and certainly a big moment for fans who invest in all facets of Coheed.
Yeah, and you know what? How interesting for you to take your creation, the Amory Wars, and use it as the backdrop for the Coheed songs, because I was super introverted and scared and shy as a kid, but I couldn't wait to get into a band to complain about everything I could never talk about, like this girl doesn't like me or this person was mean to me and all that stuff. But you didn't do that. Like you constructed this entire interesting world, and it's fed by your life, but it's not so obvious. And I just find that really interesting.
Yeah. And it's wild because like there are moments like, there are clearly songs like Wake Up. I remember writing Wake Up for my wife when we were still just boyfriend and girlfriend. And I was in LA and I was leaving to get on a plane to go do something, and I left her, she stayed back. I think we were staying at like the Beverly Laurel, and I wrote that song for that moment. And then of course, like Welcome Home was different. It was about like the angry side of, when our relationship went sour. But and then of course I took that, and then if you read like, Good Apollo 1, there are hints to those things, and so yeah, it's cool. It's allowed me to be vulnerable in a way but shielded. I was just too afraid. I didn't grow up as like a front man. I was always like a guitar player in a band. So I was always kind of I never really felt the attention that sort of you get from being like the figurehead. So I was afraid of it. And so I think that's why the Amory Wars is there.
So in 2015, when Coheed releases The Color Before the Sun, was that scary for you? Because, that's the first album outside of the Amory Wars timeline.
At that time, I wasn't. I was, I was more afraid of, that I was going, here I am, I'm about to be a dad. So I just wanted to really like tribute those emotions, that experience, without the disguise of the concept. I wanted that for myself. I wanted to
Yeah.
go back to that record and know that like as we talk, I don't have to split how things are created. It's like, because with most of Coheed, it's like, all of the, like, for years, like, most of the stuff actually all of this stuff is coming from a very personal place. But then I'd have to say, but of course I transcribe it to then become a piece of fiction. It's like, it just, some people have a hard time really like seeing the nucleus of what that project, what Coheed truly is. It's Coheed and Cambria. It's about two people coming together and like the trials and that they have to endure. I mean, it's basically just love.
Yeah.
That's what, these songs are, and just my embrace and fight with it. And so I just didn't want to have to do that when it came to talking about the feelings of becoming a dad, because it was so special to me. And of course, like, now, like the Vaxis story, of course, I'm bringing that part of my life into the story and doing that sort of thing. But at that moment in time, I knew I would never feel those feelings again.
Atlas, one of the most touching songs I've ever heard. You can just hear the love pouring out on that one. Has your son heard it? Does he like that song?
I don't think he does.
He doesn't like it.
No. It's he loved. So when he was born, that was like, I had written most of the material before he was born, and then I have video of myself like playing it, some of them to him when he was in like his crib, and like Eraser and things like that. And so at that time, he loved him. I think he grows with the music that I make. So the things that become sort of his favorites are the things that I'm working on at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild. But yeah, I think at one point it was a favorite, but now it's like his favorites was Vaxis 2, and now he's moving back into his love for Prize Fighter, because that's just kind of what we're doing now. He asks for, he wants Virtual Pioneers and things like that. And so yeah, he's just it's in his blood. So he likes it as it gets created.
That's good that he tends to like where you're at too. Imagine if he was like, I really just prefer second stage,
Right.
That would suck.
I know. Like, oh god. But that's a beautiful thing. I'm so lucky, to have like, an audience that gravitates to whatever was the thing that brought them aboard. Because it's so wild, as you have like this 20 years in the rear view, like you talk to fans and you'll hear the Color Before the Sun will come up as like this, the intro record that brought them aboard. And it's like, wow, that's, when you would expect a second stage or an In Keeping Secrets,
Right.
So it's really cool, like that happens for us.
Yeah, Coheed too, I think transcends any one scene, really. Like it's a pretty wide, I think you've acquired a pretty wide audience over time too. So I'm sure you see a lot of people who discovered you when you first got on EVR, and a ton of people who discovered you during Apollo, and just all different, all through all eras. I'm sure you see over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Coheed is I look at a track listing. I was talking to Dave the other day. We were, because Dave works at a studio up in, who's with Prize Fighter. He works at a studio in Albany. And he was talking about some of the young bands he works with, and like honing in their sound, like to be this sort of thing. And I'm like, well, Coheed ain't that. Coheed's all over the place. And I love it. I mean, as a kid, I remember like writing music, and I wanted to write whatever I loved at that moment in time. Like I'd hear like Stevie Wonder, and I'd be like, I'm going to try to mimic some of that. And like, then I listen to, Alice in Chains, and I'm like, I'm going to try to mimic some of that. I'm just bring it all. Like I love it. I don't want to have any limitations or walls. And then I listen to the records, and I'm like, oh, I could see how this could be a little perplexing to some, but for me, it's like, it's what I enjoy. Like I don't, there's no shame when I talk about, I mean, I listen to my band. I do. I don't. There's no shame. I love it. The other day. I was actually, because I was thinking about Vaxis 3, so I had to listen to Vaxis 2, and just kind of think of, because there's a ton of material right now for Vaxis 3. So what makes sense as an extension of the story, and who am I right now, and what really resonates with me, and what's that emotional thread? And so I listened to Vaxis 2, and I was like, I loved it. I'm so sorry.
There's no shame in that. I think any artist should listen to and love their music. And I do that too. I'll go back and listen to old bands of mine, and sometimes I love it. And sometimes I'm like, it's really not that good. And then sometimes I listen to it and I'm like, hey, this is awesome. But I think people should do that, especially with Vaxis too, because, just hearing more of the background of the story from you now is really touching. And it's just such a good record. I mean, that's when you started incorporating some more electronic elements that you're used to in Prize Fighter, right? Because you lost the fear, and you're like, hey, let's mix these two. What do I have to lose?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I think for me, there's a lot. Well, absolutely, a disappearing act is certainly one. But the big one for me is Window of the Waking Mind, because while I was living in, actually not in Crown Heights at the time, but I was in Park Slope. I started to work with this playwright, and we started to conceptualize the idea of doing a musical rendition of Dorian Gray, and so I wrote like the first act in the musical, the music for it, and the first song on that was I had actually read the book. I didn't know the book until it was brought to me that this was potentially going to be what we might do. And so I read the book, and then I started to write music just off of what I had read. And one of the things I found interesting was Dorian Gray's like origin story. It had such a small part in the story. So I constructed this piece, this 7 part piece that's about 12 minutes, called The Son of Love and Death. And I think it's one of my favorite pieces of music I've written. It needs to be performed by other vocalists, because there's clearly other parts that happen and things like that. But so it just kind of went to the wayside. Nothing ever happened, and I was thinking, man, I just need to figure out how to take that and make that a song for Coheed. But I didn't. I just started from scratch. I was like, you know what? I think it'd be a waste. I'm not going to give up on the idea of Dorian Gray. Maybe that will happen. So I need to write something wholly unique, and about my experiences, like being a dad, being where I am in my life, and out came A Window of the Waking Mind, utilizing all sorts of instrumentation. And then of course I started to I brought my like sort of synthesized hacking, like doing like I was just trying to construct like symphonies and things like that, behind it. And I brought it to Chris Jonke, who then like took it and really like legitimized it. But yeah, that's like Window of the Waking Mind is like means so much to me, because it's like, it's not only what the characters are sort of going through, but like, what I think any dad would as a child is growing,
Yeah.
So, I love Vaxis 2. It'll probably go down as like, as much as I love Color Before the Sun, but I think within the Amory Wars universe of Coheed Records, I think Vaxis 2 it's just going to hold a very special place in my heart.
Rightfully so. So it sounds like Vaxis 3 might be next.
Vaxis 3 is next. I mean, there's a ton of material for it, and I just trying to figure out like if I'm landing the plane properly. It's a big thing. I've always thought of records as records. I mean, even back when we were younger, like we would always think of side A, side B. It never really became like this, just this continuous sort of thing. It was always that. And like, so I still think in terms of the body of work. And right now I'm just not sure that I am, if I am getting the emotional message across. So, so I'm working on it.
I read a quote from you in some publication. You said the Vaxis series of records could essentially complete the Amory Wars if you wanted it to. Is that something you've ever thought about, like moving in a different direction or doing an offshoot or some sort?
Yes, I mean I've thought about them. But I think is like the actual thread, the line that goes from the Afterman stories through the Year of the Black Rainbow, No World arc, which is the Coheed involvement, and then into this. I feel like Vaxis 5 is the end of the story. And when that conceptually I have already mapped out. Just the songs need to be written, life needs to be lived, and that'll change things. But I know exactly how this thing ends, and I think it's satisfying, and I think it'll be super satisfying for the Coheed audience.
I think that's the sign of good writing too. You want to know what's going to happen in the start and in the middle and in the end, because when you watch one of these prestige cable drama shows, you can tell when they don't know what they're doing and they're just making it up season to season, and they're like, well, I guess we'll end here.
Right. Yeah, I have this, and I'm thrilled about it. And I think Vaxis 3, that's the thing, is conceptually, like, still songs need to be written, but we're already working on the story. We're starting the illustrations, where my wife and I are like penning them, as well as like finishing the Amory Wars Year of the Black No World for Tomorrow comics that we're actually finishing. But there's a lot going on. but yeah, we're already like sort of illustrating that. And I think there's moments in Vaxis 3 for those that are, participating, that we're going to start hinting at where we're going. There's a big hint in the next one. Yeah, I'm happy. As much as I'm scared for tomorrow, generally I'm pretty happy. I'm excited. We're doing some pretty cool things, and I got a pretty cool life, I guess. Sorry, I don't know where I'm going with that.
No, there's a lot to be happy about. I mean, you've got a lot of great things going on. I'm curious about your background. I know early formative music experiences for you. You saw Sabbath with Dio, and that was a big one, and discovering Pink Floyd, and I think seeing them early on was a big one. I'm curious about Coheed around the time of getting signed to EVR. Like, did you have any history in punk or hardcore scenes, or was that something you were into at all?
Yeah, I mean, at that time I was listening to a lot of Sunny Day. We were always coming into Manhattan, going seeing shows at like the Continental and Brownies, CBs. Saw At the Drive-In a ton of times. Jimmy Eat World, Get Up Kids. So those bands were like definitely happening in like my world at that time, right around the time of Second Stage. But we grew up like when I grew up like writing music, how I learned to write music was like the Misfits. We had a friend whose dad worked at, I believe, or a family friend had worked at a pressing plant, like a tape pressing plant that would do like the Caroline, manufacture Caroline records. And he had this wall, like when our little band would play, and there was these walls of tapes, and we would like kind of take tapes and listen to them, and just kind of, one of them that stuck with me was the Misfits' Legacy of Brutality. And I think that somehow like made me understand like song structure. Though, I mean, at that time, Coheed's song structure was like, it was just a little wacky, but and still is, but that's what like got me to like learn how to play and like parts. So yeah, I definitely had was involved.
How was the band's experience on Columbia Records? I mean, that seemed like a very logical progression, because it seemed like you guys were off to the races almost from the start. Once the first record came out, I know I saw you a couple times on that tour, and it just went, and it just went fast. And how did things go for you on Columbia? I know you released a couple records on that label.
Yeah, they were good. There were some things that, I mean, in terms of creatively, they let us choose who to work with. They were almost like, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. And we were like still kind of like this band that kind of did its own thing. But then when it came time to marketing us, it was like that was where like some of the headbutting like kind of came into play. It wasn't like horrible, but like, when we wanted to release the first song, the song that we wanted to be our flagship song was Welcome Home.
Mhm.
And I think because of the success of Favor House Atlantic, they wanted something more in that department of what Coheed does. And so we kind of met in the middle, and it was like Welcome Home became like the soft single that led up to the release. And then when that happened, then became like The Suffering took over. And it was like, we knew, my thing was like, Coheed is like this burn. It needs time, to like live in the world and like, and I think that speaks true for like the success. I mean, we're continuing to grow at like 20 years into our career, like more and more of, it just keeps growing. So it's like, it's not the obvious thing. And so that was a little discouraging because I thought, Welcome Home was clearly the song for us. And I remember like being in LA and talking to I think a marketing fellow and walking around the building and like trying to, explain my reasoning for wanting that song. And like, the hook isn't in the lyric, it's in the riffs, it's in the, you got to look at it like, like a, I was trying to give like examples like Rage Against the Machine or something, like the riffs or the power behind these things, like, that's the music. And I failed.
Well, we did not fail with the song. That is a jam. Yeah, that's one of the best riffs. Zeppelin influence there. I got serious Zeppelin vibes.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah.
We used to fool around, before songs had titles. Like as I wrote them, like I just gave them like silly names, like like The Light in the Glass off of In Keeping Secrets was Stairway to Heaven 2. And then that was probably Cashmere too. Who knows? Like, but it's like we joke around things like that, and but yeah.
I love that, the band working title song, which is usually for for my band, it's just whatever band we're trying to rip off. Jets to Brazil song, Blue Tip song, whatever we're going for.
Right. For me, it was like even like Light in the Glass. Like I thought about it, I'm like, it's not so much that we're like trying to rip it off, but like when I finished writing it, I was like, oh, it's got the it's got the same progression as like A Stairway to Heaven or 3 Days by Jane's Addiction. Like, these like almost two songs in one kind of situations. And I find that like Coheed kind of like does that a lot. Like the song will lead you to a middle ground and then like kind of shift into something else and outro you into another, like even The Crowing, for example. Like, so yeah, it's like, I just wish, yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but yeah.
Here's the thing. I try to rip off song, and this is a good thing, actually. I try to rip off songs, and then when my band plays them, it becomes something completely different. But that's what you want, and that's my rule now. Like, it's okay to be influenced by something, but once you're done with it, it has to sound like your own specific thing.
Right. I got that.
Yeah. The Soundgarden show you played a long time ago where Mike, the former bass player, got arrested. Did you guys end up playing that show that night?
We did.
And what happened? Did you play without a bass player, or was someone able to jump in? What did you do?
We just, at that time we were like, we just need somebody to sit in and just play the roots, the root notes of the progression. So Rob Gill, our monitor and guitar tech I think he was our guitar tech at the time, sat in and did it.
That must have been a tough show to play, all things considered.
Yes. You know what? Well, this is it's wild, but I didn't really talk to Chris Cornell that much on the tour, but at that moment, I mean, clearly, cops are surrounding our bus. Comic books are pulled out of the bays, the it was a to do, and they appreciated it. And Chris came over and he said, man, I'm sorry to hear about your bass player. I've done some crazy shit in my time. Not that crazy. And then I was like, what?
Wow.
But yeah, it was wild. It was a really it was just a wild moment in time, I think, for everybody, clearly. So we wanted to do what's right. I think it was maybe the last show on that, and so we did what we could.
That was the last show on that tour?
I believe so, if I remember correctly, yeah.
So you didn't talk to Chris too much during that tour? Was he usually sequestered away somewhere?
I don't know. I mean, I'm also pretty much keep to myself person, so I don't necessarily think it was anything to do with that, or I was probably on the bus most of the time, but
right.
But yeah, it was that was like I was like, wow, that was wild.
Yeah, that's another thing, especially in a tour situation like that, I don't want to bother people. So I if I'm walking by and a conversation starts, I'll say hi to people, but I kind of always operate under I don't want to bother people, so let me just hang back.
Yeah, me too. I'm just again, it's the same thing walking around Brooklyn and having a hard time going into a bodega to grab, a water. It's like I don't I just don't want to really be in the awkward moment.
Yeah. Funny that Chris said not that crazy. I understood when I read that story, and when I read about things Josh had been through, and I heard him on another podcast, just because I went through a lot of those same things, not the exact same things, but addiction and all of the craziness that comes with it. And I had to work through a lot of that stuff too, and in that state had a lot more anxiety. Get this, I a long time ago I read Russ and Daughters in Manhattan. They have the best black and white cookies, right? So I'm I went all the way out there, and I was too afraid to go into the store, so I just left and I didn't get one. That's how bad the anxiety was at that time, and how crippling the loss of self-confidence was in that state.
Right. Yeah, I have moments like that with you for sure.
It's got to be good to have Josh back in the band too now, right? Considering everything that happened before. When did you broach that conversation? When did that come about? How did that come about?
I think it was around the time we were doing the Afterman, where I was writing the Afterman, and I don't know. We my memory is sometimes a little foggy, but I remember we had seen Josh. I can't remember exactly what it was. And it was Travis, myself driving upstate, and Josh was in the back seat, and I ended up playing him, I think, Gravity's Union. And I remember feeling him air drumming in the back. I forget why we were in that moment. Maybe he had wanted to apologize or something for what had happened. And again, my memory is super foggy. There's just so much stuff happening that I get lost. Details just go. But I just remember that because I could feel his energy in the back, and I'm like, that's what that song needs. And I loved Gravity's Union. It's one of my favorite Coheed songs. It's just because when I had wrote that song, and I was sitting in my studio and was living upstate New York at the Big Beige. It was this house in way onto New York, and I had finished it without. It was drumless, I just write without, and I get to the end, the big moment, and I was in tears, and this is 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm a lunatic. I'm air drumming as hard as I can. My chest is pumping. Tears are coming out of my face. And I was like, I just wrote this song, and when the world is asleep, and I am just slamming away. And when I could feel Josh's energy behind me, in that car ride, I was like, that's what needs to be on this song. And And so then I think we decided, Travis and I talked to him, I hit up Josh and I was like, I got this prize fighter thing I'm working on, and I was wondering if you'd like to play on it. And I think he came down and I think we played a song off of like one of the songs that was going to be on Afterman. Maybe it was like Two's My Favorite One or something. I can't remember. And I think he knew. It was like, this was in Prize Fighter, fool. Like, it's clearly not. But yeah, so that's kind of what happened. But I love Josh. He's my favorite drummer of all time. So I'm happy that he's here.
Yeah, I'm happy that he's doing better and that you guys are back together now. All right, so let's recap. Now, the Prize Fighter Inferno. There's an excellent new single out, Virtual Pioneers, along with the Going Price for Home reimagined. So we want everybody to check those out, right, Claudio?
Yes, absolutely. Please.
Yes. And the tour kicks off February 16th in DC. It'll be underway by the time you hear this, and look, many of the dates are sold out, but some aren't. So check that thing called the internet. And if you have the opportunity to go see the Prize Fighter Inferno, they should go, right, Claudio? This is a once in a lifetime, first time ever opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they should. If only to see me freak out.
Yes, go and encourage Claudio, but don't make him too nervous. He's nervous, all right? We want these gigs to go well. And look, if you somehow have not heard Coheed and Cambria yet, I mean, go and do it. Vaxis 2, A Window of the Waking Mind, just came out in 2022, and it sounds like we have Vaxis 3 to look forward to.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, Claudio, I just want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I've been listening to you since the first record, and I love everything you do. And I wish you and your family and all of your bandmates continued success. And thank you.
Oh, thank you, Keith. Thanks for having me.
And there you have it. Claudio Sanchez. Amazing conversation. Super, super happy to have Claudio on the show. Coheed and Cambria, I have a history with. Well, not much of a personal history, but when they first got started and Second Stage Turbine Blade came out on Equal Vision, they were around a lot. I think they played with This Day Forward, and I know they were friends with This Day Forward, and they would be around. One of my best friends, Pat McCormick, actually went out with Coheed on one of their very first tours. Maybe it was their first tour, I don't know, but it was like a full US tour, and he was out with them as a tour manager. And Claudio even named a character in the Amory Wars after Pat. There's a character in the Amory Wars called Patrick McCormick, which is pretty great. So they would be around. I would see them, always love them since that first record. And look at the heights they've gone to. I mean, how awesome is that? And they've continued making great music. Vaxis 2 is just unbelievable. I mean, they managed to do very different things from what they've started out doing, and it's still them, and it's still great. I'm really happy that the Prize Fighter Inferno is out there touring now and doing really well. And Claudio was just so forthcoming. I mean, you heard him talking about his grandfather and all of that life experience that goes into the Amory Wars, and him getting emotional during that was making me emotional. And just him being that forthcoming, I think, was just fantastic. And I'm really happy that he came on the show. Thank you so much, Claudio, for coming on the show. Oh, yeah, and speaking of Pat, he was on an early episode of this podcast, episode 24. Check it out if you want to hear more about his experiences with Coheed and Cambria. All right, so let's check in. How are we doing? Everything is going great here. The podcast is very, very busy. We've got a lot of great episodes coming up. So I've been doing a ton of research, a ton of recording, and a ton of making content. So that's busier than ever. My band is gearing up to finish recording our EP at the end of this month. So that's a main focus for me right now. There's a lot of important gaming going on. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just came out. That's part 2 of the Final Fantasy VII remake, and I'm enjoying that. There's some things that are weird, like, I don't know. I don't love the battle system. It's complicated. I think they threw too much stuff into this game. I'm not playing the card game at all. The card game is what made me quit Final Fantasy VIII back in the day, because I would get these good cards and then lose them, and I got frustrated and I stopped. I could do without the card game. I could do without all the crafting. Every game has to add crafting now, I guess because of Breath of the Wild and whatever the sequel to that is called, Tears of the Kingdom. So I'm not going to craft. I'm not playing any card game. I'm just going to play the game and do the story. I like things simple, but I'm enjoying it so far. You know, I like this fresh take on Final Fantasy VII because one of my favorite games of all time, probably my favorite game story of all time. And that's about it. That's about it. Things are good. Things are good here. So let's move into the new scene, Community Hour. And I am very happy to announce that we have hit 200 reviews. Finally, we hit 200 reviews on Apple Podcasts. So thank you so much to everybody who submitted a review. We are there. We have done it. So I'm going to give it a rest for a little bit. And then eventually we'll start the push to 300. But let me start the Community Hour now by reading some new Apple Podcast reviews that we have gotten. All right, I don't remember where I left off, so I'm going to start right here. 5 stars from Tweet Meyer. Love the show. Thanks for the great job you're doing. Thank you, Tweet Meyer, for that review. I've got an updated review here from Sean Carl. Sean says, just listen to the Jay Robbins episode. Such good questions, conversation, insights, etc. The patience and the selfless ability to care about the artists and the stories they are telling is refreshing and makes for a super enjoyable listen. Thanks so much for these episodes and deep dives into the music that brings vitality into my life. Cheers, Sean Rees. Sean, thank you. That was very nice. All right, we've got another one from Austin Kin. So rad, 5 stars. I hope I get to be review 200. So many great artists on this podcast, and each episode is the perfect length. Informative without being indulgent. It's starting to feel like I personally know Keith, so maybe that's weird? Either way, I'm into it, and you should be too. Thank you, Austin. And no, that is not weird. I do the same thing. I think a lot of people do. You know, there's Twitch streamers I watch every day that I feel like I know. I've been listening to Howard Stern for like 30 years, maybe more. I feel like I know a lot of those people. There's podcasts I've listened to in the past where I've gotten somewhat attached to the people I'm listening to, and I love it. I love it. And if I can do that for somebody else, awesome. Thank you for listening, and thank you for the review, Austin. Another review from Boy Likes Noise. Great podcast for hardcore enthusiasts. 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoy these podcasts. Great interviewer. Just finished listening to the Rob Fish episode. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Boy Likes Noise. I will do that. And I'm glad you're enjoying the show. And I think this is review 200. I think this was it. 5 stars, a new favorite from Iodine's own, Jesse Moss. Jesse says, Keith really has a knack for connecting with his guests. Everyone always seems to be so comfortable and the conversation flows easily and is engaging to listen to. I found myself starting with bands I already knew, like Jeff Rickley from Thursday, but I found myself going down the rabbit hole of artists I'm unfamiliar with just to hear more. The sign of a great host, in my opinion. Long live the new scene. Thank you, Jesse. Yes, I'm pretty sure you are review 200, and I'm very happy that it was you. Thank you so much for the kind words. And again, thank you everybody for getting us to 200. We did it. But I've got some other nice messages here I got from peoples that I want to read. I got a message from Mike Gammon on Instagram. He says, hey man, just wanted to reach out and say how awesome the show is. I have been devouring it ever since I saw Aaron Turner post about it. Can't believe how awesome the guest lineup is. And you, sir, are a great host. You have great chat, insight, and hosting style. If you ever hit Bristol, United Kingdom, I'll buy you a coffee. Wow, thank you, Mike. I will take you up on that if I'm ever in Bristol, UK. I haven't been to the UK since I went right after I graduated high school with a friend who then became my long-term girlfriend on the trip. And I was in London, and it was awesome. I would love to go back at some point. Got a message from Chuck Ordino. He says, this is about the J. Robbins episode. Chuck says, love the episodes, Keith. You're quite gifted as an interviewer and podcaster. Well, Chuck, I'm going to take your word for it, but thank you very much for those very kind words. Oh, and I got a message from my friend Ben Baker. That's one of the fellows behind Ashtray Monument Records, and he's in a band called In Transit. We were talking about the J. Robbins episode. He had nice things to say about that. Ben is in an excellent band called In Transit. Check them out. And they did a track with the singer of one of my all-time favorite bands, Garrett Klon from Texas Is the Reason. The track is called Sanitized and Canonized. And that track features Garrett Klon, so check it out. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. What else do we have here? Let's see. I heard from Joe Chavez. Joe says, hey, Keith, I just finished listening to the J. Robbins episode and wanted to reach out because you mentioned Sean Ingram and Coalesce at the end. Back in the early 2000s, I played drums in a short-lived band, Myasis, that was fortunate enough to have Sean sing on a couple tracks of ours that were ultimately released through Undecided Records. Another recent guest of yours, Aaron Turner, did the art for the EP as well. Like most releases from small obscure bands like ours, it got lost to time, but a couple years ago I put it on Bandcamp and wanted to send it to you. Sean is truly a great person, and as an immense Coalesce fan, I'm still blown away he gave us the time of day, let alone flew out on his own dime to record his vocals in our friend's small basement studio. I'm also a fan of your podcast, and I've been listening to the show for a bit now and really enjoy your interviews. I look forward to an interview between you and Sean because I know it'll be a great conversation. Like you, a Furnace Fest trip sounds exhausting at my age, but with the announcements that both Coalesce and the Shai Hulud, That Within Blood, Ill-Tempered lineup are playing, I'm finding it hard to imagine myself at home that weekend. Anyway, thank you for all your amazing work you put into the podcast. That's from Joe Chavez. And the band is Myasis, Miasis. And I checked out those tracks with Sean on vocals. Pretty great stuff. And you know what, Joe? I look forward to an interview between myself and Sean as well. And I hope that happens. I'm trying. I really need to see Coalesce. I really need to. I'm torn about Furnace Fest, but we'll see. We'll see. But thank you for the nice message, Joe. I also heard from Joey Coles, who had this to say about part 2 of our Anthony Green interview. That's episode 42 of this show. He says, another great episode. I happened to be eating at a diner by myself, listening to the episodes. So when Anthony said that story about him at the diner by himself, I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, that's, I think, look, I'm tooting my own horn a bit here, but I think that's the best Anthony Green interview out there. Okay, one of them. Check out episode 41 and 42 of this podcast. We did a comprehensive 2-part interview with Anthony Green, and I think it's some of the best background on his early days in music and then covering all the way up to Circa Survive and the last record, because we grew up with him. We know him, and, you know, Tommy was in Audience of One with him, so it's really good background on Anthony. All right, a couple more messages here. Heath Gibson. We know Heath Gibson. He's a longtime listener of the show from the band Enduring Reverie. He had this to say about the J. Robbins episode. Great episode. Honestly, I never really listened to any of Jay's bands. I've known his name as a producer for some time. I don't know how I missed out on Jawbox back in the day, as I'm discovering they're fantastic. I'm one of those listeners that regardless of knowing the artist, I listen to the show and enjoy discovering their music. Hey, better late than never. Looking forward to hearing all his music over the next week or so. Thank you, Heath. Yeah, that's awesome. I love when people listen, even if they don't know the artist. That makes me happy. And Yeah, a lot of people discover different music through this show, and I love it. That's always been something I really love. I've always made mix CDs, playlists, and I've always taken great joy in showing people new music throughout my entire life. So if people are discovering new bands through this show, I love it. I love it. All right, one more message here from Doc Thor Q. He had this to say about the Poor Cell episode. Geez, I have no idea why I found you folks just now, not earlier. I hope your super valuable channel explodes. Hardcore forever. Thank you for the content. Doc had that message on YouTube. Yeah, YouTube is not our biggest platform by a long shot. I put everything up on YouTube just, because I want to be on every platform. And I spend so much time on YouTube. I want to have a presence there as well. But it's just another place for people to find us. So thank you, Doc, and welcome to the new scene. And listen, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you everybody for your support. The podcast is bigger than it's ever been right now. We've got a lot of really big shows coming up that are going to blow your mind, and it's going to be great. So let's end the show with the new single from the Prize Fighter Inferno. It's called Virtual Pioneers. I'm back next week with a new episode and a new guest. So thanks everybody for listening, and until next time.